Hey guys, and welcome back. So there are a variety of possible cases in which you may want rhythm to be less of a focus in your music and to focus more on evolving textures, timbres, tones. One of the primary cases of this is ambient music, so that's what we're going to be talking about here. So this video is basically going to be breaking down this track, so going through all the different tracks I have here, explaining why you would want to focus more on this other stuff that isn't rhythm, and then also just how I've been doing that, particularly within this DAW, and then just a couple of tips that aren't specifically for ambient but are more about working with a DAW, because that's a bit difficult on my laptop, so I have some performance related tips to talk about, and then also just some tips to do with like sound design things and arrangement things and stuff like that. So a whole variety of things around making non-rhythmic music, specifically in the world of ambient and within a DAW. So the DAW I'm using is Cakewalk. I'm fairly new to it. Soon I will be making a video about my initial impressions of it, and I haven't really properly used a DAW before this, so it'll be more about my experience getting into using a DAW. So that video will be up here somewhere. And also all the sounds in this track are made with the Capture VST. There will also be a review of that coming soon up here. And that's a VST that's designed for simple, quick and easy sound design rather than deep sound design into a synth engine. It's more just for quick, intuitive sound design. So yeah, check out the video for that if you're interested. If you have a Novation Circuit Tracks, make sure to, I don't know if they're still doing it, but I picked up the plugin because they were offering it for free if you have one of these. So make sure to register your Circuit Tracks and pick it up if you haven't already. Also, speaking of our old friend here, if you're trying to do some of this non-rhythmic stuff on hardware, that may be an issue because a lot of hardware is very rhythm oriented in terms of the sequencing. So another video up here somewhere is going to be about how to apply some of these techniques on rhythm-based hardware, because it's a bit more difficult, but there are certain things you can do to get around it. And with all that self-promotion out of the way, let's start getting into this track here. So, firstly, why? Well, as I said, obviously ambient music, which is what I would classify this as. So what you normally want is more evolving, slow moving things, so not just slow chords changing only every so often, but you want to have a lot of elements where each one is moving very slowly, but they're all moving in between each other, so that there's always something changing and it's always going somewhere, but everything changes at different times, so it's always moving, but you can never point to one thing that's going at a steady rhythm, which is exactly what you want for ambient music, and is exactly what I've, tried to do here. There are definitely some elements of rhythm, specifically within the lead, but there is less so of it across the rest of the track, and I've been actively avoiding it in a few ways. So yeah, we're going to talk about that when I actually get into the tracks. Speaking of which, let's start by going through these tracks. You'll see each of these tracks is archived, which is the little A button, and also frozen. What does those two buttons do? Well, freeze is why they're all audio tracks. Even though I said they're using a Capture VST, they're all clearly not MIDI tracks here, they're audio, and that's because they've been bounced down from VST MIDI tracks to audio so that my laptop can handle it better. And yet it still struggles to play 7 audio files at once, which is a bit concerning. However, and that is why they're all also archived, which basically mutes them, but also completely doesn't process any of the audio or effects or anything to completely take the load off the CPU. No, don't do that, don't do that. Okay, all of these tracks are frozen, so they're just audio tracks, and then also archived, so that none of them are actually playing, and then I'll just unarchive each one to show you now. So, let's get started with the simple high pad. So there are two pads here, the simple high pad and the dissonant mid pad, and because they're just audio tracks, I can't go into the plugin or the effects and show you what's going on, so I've got some notes here for the interesting stuff. So let's take a look at the simple high pad. So I'll unarchive it and just play through it, and you can have a listen while I ramble. So it's called simple high pad because obviously high, it's in the relatively high range of the frequency spectrum, and simple because it's just playing simple triads. Notice the contrast to dissonant here, which we'll get into in a sec. So yeah, just playing simple triads in a fairly high frequency range. In terms of the actual plugin, so obviously it's Capsule using the Space Traveler preset, and then the stock delay within Cakewalk, as well as Valhalla Supermassive, which is a reverb delay thing by Valhalla. In terms of automation, which is the primary way I've been getting this slow moving textural stuff, it's on the character, sweep, noise, unison, and the delay time within Supermassive. So those are the 5 parameters that are being automated. Obviously the first 4 are within the synth preset, within the synth VST itself. And then one of them is within an effect plugin. Now let's move on to the other pad here. Just put this back on archive. So this one is called dissonant mid pad because it is playing more dissonant intervals in a lower range of the frequency spectrum. Not quite low enough to be bass, not quite high enough for this high pad, but it kind of overlaps with both of them. It is the radio pad preset within Capsule, and it has slow automation of the flanger and the tape parameters. And it also is using Valhalla Supermassive, but it does not have any automation on the Supermassive. So yeah, that's that track. So then let's get into the shimmers. So as you can see, there are 2 of them, one for the left channel, one for the right. So what these are basically, not necessarily, I was originally picturing like really high-end shimmer that I could add in. They're not necessarily so high-end, they're just additional sort of effects, texture, less tonal stuff. So yeah, on the left we have a preset called Waves, and then on the right we have a preset called Twisteltronic. Yeah, they're both just playing fairly high notes and moving slowly around, just adding some more texture in the background. As I said, Waves and Twisteltronic are the presets. And then the Waves preset uses a reverb within the Capsule VST. And then the Twisteltronic doesn't really have that, it just has a long, slow release. But these 2 don't really need so much of that reverb delay spatial effects because they're not so important in the mix. They're just to add a bit more texture. So next up we have the basses. So originally we had 8 tracks and the bass was also split into left and right channels, but the right one got corrupted, so this is the left side, but now it's not on the left anymore. And then we also have a sub bass. So the bass, as you can see, has quite a lot of information here, so there's a lot going on. So I'll just play it for you and we'll have a chat. So it's playing individual notes fairly slowly with legato and glide within the Capsule VST. It's using a preset called Odyssey within Capsule, and there is automation on the cutoff, sweep, unison, detune, and phaser. And then also the character parameter, which is this really fast moving automation here, is being automated very quickly. It's not really very noticeable because it's a fairly unimportant parameter within the synth engine. And then as you can see, it originally had stereo separation, but the right side was corrupted. So that's the bass. And then we can take a look at the sub, which I'm planning to have fairly quiet within the mix because it's not the ideal sub sound I was hoping for, but it's a preset called Junie Bass. And it's just slow moving notes in the very low end, and there is some pan automation. Speaking of pan automation, We also have that on a couple of other tracks, specifically the simple high pad. So yeah, that's the bass, and then also just take a listen to the pan automation here, sort of moving around in the stereo spectrum. Now going to the right ear. So yeah, and then finally we have the lead. So this track only comes in around the second half of the song, and this one has a bit more rhythm to it, which you can probably hear because of that LFO on it, which is just part of the preset. So let's take a look at the information here. There's not really much to it. It's just a preset called Creamy. Obviously as with all of these tracks, I've done some modification to the preset, just tweaking around the sound. And there's also no automation on this track. But let's take a look. Well, let's just have a listen to it. And I might see if we can unmute just this pad so you have at least a little bit of context here. And this is where you can hear that the two tracks, and also, well, all of the tracks aren't synced in any rhythmic way. So obviously the lead has a bit of rhythm within itself because of that modulation, and like I couldn't really play anything in without having to like play along with the rhythm of that. But everything else, like nothing is synced together. So in terms of how I've been actively avoiding rhythm and synchronization, basically it's just as simple as muting all the other tracks when I record each one, not having a metronome or anything like that. It does say 60 BPM up here, but that's pretty irrelevant because nothing is actually synchronized, and I never had a metronome on or anything. So now I'm just going to talk a bit about what I've been doing instead of focusing on rhythm, and you might... And I've been talking about this a little bit throughout the video. And also, you're currently listening to the final version of the track. It might be released sometime on Bandcamp or something. If it is, there'll be a link in the description eventually. But the version you're hearing now probably doesn't have very much mixing done to it. But yeah, at least now you can hear all the tracks together. So anyway, let's talk about what I've been doing instead of rhythm. So in terms of slow evolving textures and tones and timbres and other words that start with T, we have obviously all this automation that you can see in here on different parameters within Capsule, and also like panning, and there'll also be quite a bit of volume automation when I eventually finish the mix, which you probably can't hear right now, but if this ever does get released, there will be that volume automation there. So yeah, just that slow moving stuff, and then also, like I mentioned, intentionally avoiding rhythm, and then I guess automating everything. It's quite slow. Some of this was just recorded in by manually tweaking knobs with my mouse while recording the automation. Unfortunately, although I got these knobs on the circuit tracks to control the parameters within the Capsule VST, and like I could control that in real time, Cakewalk wouldn't allow me to record those hardware controls directly into automation lanes, so I could only do live recording of automation by just using my mouse on the VST knob. And then some of the ones I also just drew in. I did that with a lot of the slower moving ones and the pan automation and stuff, just so that I didn't have to sit there for 2.5 minutes fiddling with a knob. I think that's really it in terms of like active things I've been doing to focus more on non-rhythmic stuff. So yeah, so that's about it for this video. Hopefully you found it helpful in terms of not just tips for ambient and non-rhythmic music, but also maybe some general tips for performance if your DAW can't handle certain things, or well, your laptop or computer is a bit useless. The general takeaways are just the slow moving automation and actively avoiding rhythms in the ways I discussed before, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and consider subscribing to my channel so you can catch the videos that I mentioned earlier about the specific software and how to do these techniques with hardware and so on. Yeah, if you have any comments, feedback or suggestions, make sure to leave them down below in the comment section. And other than that, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.